Greetings. Good to see you or imagine seeing you in cyberspace. The Boulder bookstore has asked me to say a few words about my upcoming book, Sentence, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so. My name is Mikhail Iossel. Um, I was born and spent the first 30 years of my life in the former Soviet Union in St. Petersburg, now Leningrad, where I was an engineer, member of an underground samizdat literary club, a dissident, and for the last several years, while waiting for immigration visa, um, get permission to leave the Soviet Union. I was night guard at the Central Park of Culture and Recreation. So this book, Sentence, um, it's my fourth book in English and the most unconventional one. It's a book of stories, each comprised of just one sentence. Longer sentences, longer stories are interspersed with short ruminations, observations, memories, and so forth. So this book is essentially about inventing a different mode of telling stories. One of the stories is titled How to Write a Russian Sentence in English. And although it's a tongue-in-cheek title, but nonetheless, there is something to it, as Russian sentences are less structured than English ones. They allow for greater degree of freedom sometimes, but also less precision. And this book kind of marks my progress from coming to the US in '86 and knowing very little English, not being able to write in English for certain, and then trying to start writing in English. So from very short sentences, very basic modes of expression, to this celebration of language of sorts, and my freedom to express myself in a different mode of telling, of doing narrative. So um, some will find this book challenging, perhaps. Some will find it thrilling, I hope, and I hope there'll be more of the latter than the former, of those who will check out this book. A little bit of prehistory, how I got to, how this book came into being. I was writing those sentences and posting them on Facebook just for my own enjoyment because it was pure freedom, it was pure joy, and uh, um, and someone noticed. It turned out to be the late Stan Persky, one of the founders, progenitors of the Canadian literary avant-garde, someone I indebted to. And so he asked if he could serialize those sentences in his literary journal. I agreed. And I started writing those sentences in a regular fashion, maybe once every 10 days or so. And then, unfortunately, Stan fell ill and passed away. I kind of lost motivation for continuing in this mode. But then an editor approached me and suggested that maybe we should publish a book of those sentences, which gave me a new impetus for writing those. And so I produced some more. So that's it in a nutshell. Sentence refers to obviously the fact that every story is a sentence with its own timeline and a storyline, but also a story where the past and the present constantly collide and intermingle and adjust upon each other. But it's also a book of memories, and memory very often is just imagination pointing backwards. And it's a book of recognition that we are all sentenced to our life's path, to our destiny, to our memories, to our recollections, to our dreams and hopes, to the inevitability of loss in life, the inevitability of aging. All of that is in this book. All of this is a book of put together comprises this book. Um, I was raised in the tradition of Russian literature, and then I was enriched further by reading and learning from American and international literature. And so that's it's been quite a path from somebody who came in 1986 to the United States, um, confused, hoping that he could continue writing in Russian and make a living that way. That illusion was shattered within the first 20 minutes upon my arrival to the United States, and to now being, for the last 20 years, an associate professor of English creative writing at Concordia University in Montreal. So that's as far as the prehistory of this book goes. And now I'll just, with your permission, well, tacit permission, implicit permission, I'll just give you a basic idea of how this narrative is arranged. Let me read maybe just the opening of the very first story, DMD, which is 7,000 words, but I'll just read one first page. On January 9, 1986, I would remember the date because, of course, it was the bloody Sunday of 1905, that of the ubiquitous mentions in Soviet school history books. Less than 2 weeks before leaving the Soviet Union for good, for the first and last time in my life, the Soviet Union, not Russia, I was returning to Leningrad from Moscow, also for the last time ever, Leningrad, not St. Petersburg, after three strange, and of course everything felt eerily strange to me at that juncture in my life, shapelessly endless booze-fueled days and nights of bidding incoherent funereal farewells to a motley crowd of friends and acquaintances there in the giant stone heart of the eternal Soviet golem, unexpectedly, but then again it was the middle of the first work week of the new year, and the increasingly dispirited giant country was still dawdling in glum post-holiday lethargy all across its scentless 11 time zones. Half-empty red arrow, once the famously upscale train for the so-called Soviet elites, not the right word, I know, but it would be boring both for you and for me if I were to say instead something along the lines of, quote, the transiently lucky and generally pitiful servants and beneficiaries of an irredeemably ugly totalitarian regime connecting Russia's former and present capitals, the respective avatars of its hopeless European aspirations and its shambolic Scythian essence, and invariably departing from either point at 5 minutes to midnight. So that's just the first page of the 27-page long story. Then it's followed by several short pieces. Um, Timelessness. Time wounds all heals. Time wounds all heals, but it doesn't heal all wounds. Instead, it turns the wounds into vaguely painful, empty spaces within us. It makes us older. It makes us weaker. It makes us sadder and weepier. It makes us lonelier and ever more in clinging need of love. It makes us maudlin and sentimental, soft and uncertain and gullible, brittle and frail. It turns us into our real selves, the slow walking gluttonous for life's punishment, but in the end, as its sole act of kindness, it slips away quietly and leaves us alone face to face with its eternal antagonist, timelessness. And then another short one, emptiness. Someone I've always believed to belong on the relative outskirts of my old life, a man my age of whom I haven't had a single meaningful thought or even a momentary heart-quickening recollections in decades, died last month, alcohol-ridden, borderline demented and destitute. A friend who also knew him wrote to me from St. Petersburg the other day, and strangely, though not really, I suppose, I'm now missing him, that seemingly and in actuality inconsequential man, distinctly, if not too strongly, just wistfully and helplessly, much in the way I tend to miss my own life, in which everyone's absence, no matter how permanently immaterial, leaves a permanent and irreversible emptiness. Germans like him. Many, oh, many years ago, in the god-awful year 1983 of our Soviet Lord Yuri Andropov, if memory serves me, it may not, back in Leningrad in another lifetime at an unofficial art exhibit one afternoon in a popular and also semi-clandestine basement cultural club in the heart of the city, I had a random encounter with a rather elderly and visibly inebriated man from the GDR. Some may still remember that unbeautiful acronym, German Democratic Republic, a fellow underground writer's acquaintance, I believe, who walked with a limp, due, as he would later cheerily volunteer, to one of his legs being shorter than the other by a few centimeters since birth, and spoke fairly good, if slightly halting and, given his condition, understandably slurred Russian, having started studying it right after the fall of Berlin in 1945, first on his own and then in state-run language courses, in order presumably to, oh, I didn't care to ask, to like maybe read Dostoevsky in the original or whatever, just a wild guess. And he told me in an entirely had been and rather inappropriately unironic revelation, but then yet again he was drunk, that although he had lived in Germany under Hitler and was keenly and constantly aware of the ineradicable dark stain of, granted as absolutely an absolutely ineluctable one too, because what could one realistically do and not be disappeared on the spot? That wasn't even a question. We don't choose the times or the most essential circumstances of our lives and all that, but still, mute subservience to the ugliest evil in all of documented human history, which as a result lay forever on him and millions of other still living Germans like him, the dead. Those lucky bastards were, of course, blessedly guilt-free. He wanted and needed, yes, needed me to know, for some inexplicable and unwelcome reason, that every single day during those terrible, interminable 12 years of Nazi rule in the dead of night, without fail, his hand to God in a grimly ritualistic fashion, he would write in a feverishly hurried, blind scroll by candlelight or in pitch darkness whether he'd been married, had children, what he'd been doing for a living, an accountant, perhaps an engineer, and why he hadn't been conscripted by the Wehrmacht. Ah, yes, his short leg. I wasn't curious enough to ask any of those questions. With his heart pounding away in the hollow of his rib cage, an impromptu prose poem, yes, really, if that's what it was supposed to be called, about Hitler's imminent and extremely painful death, prophesying and visualizing and describing the infernal creature's final agony in the soul-wrenching minutiae of gory details, and concluding each of those cathartic cursive eruptions with the same desperate invocation, die, you beastly animal, die, and then immediately afterwards, dizzy with momentary lightheadedness, striking a match over an ashtray, presumably, or else perhaps in the toilet, to set that little piece of notebook paper trembling in his hand on fire, liberating it from itself and himself from that tortured text, his surefire death sentence, if found, every single night for all those years. Yes, imagine, dear comrade, and I, suddenly and unaccountably feeling queasy with an onset of burning shame, whether it was for him or for myself or all of us, I couldn't and wouldn't want to tell. Filled with vague, unfocused disgust, I only nodded silently, curtly, strike that, sympathetically, avoiding his pitiful swimming eyes, and hastened to excuse myself from his presence. Yes, and so something short, the last one, called That Girl. I still remember someone I met in a dream when I was 5 years of age and living in the suburbs of Moscow with my grandparents, a girl my age who knew everything there was to know about me, understood me more fully than anyone else possibly ever could, and was the closest person to me in the entire world, and right away, from the very first, overcome with an almost unbearable happiness, I knew with utmost certainty that we would spend the rest of our lives being inseparable as one and the same person, the most faithful of friends, and she told me she felt the same, even though the two of us had never met in our respective non-dream realities, and the and she would never visit me again in my sleep. It was just that one night in my early childhood, yet I still remember her name and, if a little vaguely, what she looked like because I kept thinking about her and waiting for her for years afterwards. It is possible, I believe, that many, if not most, of us go through life missing someone we've never met, someone we don't even know we've been missing. But now that both of our lives are gradually drawing to a close, I no longer hope to see her again in any of my dreams in this reality, no longer waiting. So maybe we'll meet again on the other side or in another life, Tanya. Well, um, cyberspace friends, and again, thank you to you, and thank you to Boulder Bookstore for the opportunity. I hope some of you will check out this book, Sentence, and some of those who will check it out will actually like it. And it was a pleasure talking to you. Bye.